The avoidant is in love with you, and that's precisely why they disappeared. This seems backwards to anyone with secure attachment. When you fall for someone, you move closer, not further away. When feelings deepen, you pursue more, not less. When connection becomes meaningful, you invest more energy, not withdraw it entirely. But the avoidant operates from completely inverted logic. The depth of their feelings for you isn't drawing them toward you. It's propelling them away from you with force that increases proportionally to how much they care. They fell for you, hard, in ways they've never fallen before. And the terror of that falling is so overwhelming that staying away feels like the only way to survive. Not because you did anything wrong, not because they don't want you, but because they want you too much, and wanting anything that much feels like annihilation. The avoidant didn't plan to fall for you. They had their defenses carefully arranged, their walls strategically positioned, their distance meticulously maintained. They were going to keep things casual, keep you at arm's length, keep their heart protected behind barriers that had worked for years. But something about you bypassed every defense. Maybe it was your patience with their fear. Maybe it was how safe they felt in your presence. Maybe it was the specific way you saw through their performance to the wounded person beneath. Whatever it was, you got in. You penetrated defenses designed to be impenetrable. And now the avoidant is experiencing feelings so intense they don't know how to function, feelings that contradict everything they've built their identity around, feelings that threaten the very core of who they believe themselves to be. What you're interpreting as rejection or disinterest is actually the opposite. The avoidant is staying away because they care too much, not too little. They're creating distance because you matter too much, not because you're irrelevant. They're protecting themselves from you because you have the power to hurt them in ways no one else could, and that power is terrifying. The avoidant has spent their entire life avoiding exactly this situation, caring about someone so much that losing them would be devastating. They've structured everything to prevent this level of attachment, but it happened anyway. They fell for you despite all their protections, and now they're doing the only thing their psychology knows how to do when feelings become overwhelming. They're running. The terror of needing someone. The avoidant fell for you, and falling for someone means needing them, and needing someone activates every wound the avoidant has spent their life protecting. Need feels like death to the avoidant's psychology. It brings up memories from childhood when they needed caregivers who couldn't meet those needs consistently. It triggers associations with vulnerability that led to pain or rejection or abandonment. It resurrects feelings of helplessness, of being dependent on someone who might disappoint or hurt or leave. The avoidant learned early that needing people is dangerous, that showing need leads to suffering, that the safest position is needing nothing from anyone. But they need you now. They need your presence in ways that shock them. They need your voice, your laugh, your specific way of understanding them. They need to know you're thinking about them. They need reassurance that you're not going to leave. They need consistency from you that would help them feel safe. These needs are arising despite all their efforts to suppress them, and the experience is overwhelming. The avoidant is feeling need with an intensity they've spent decades avoiding, and their nervous system is interpreting this need as emergency-level threat. Everything in them is screaming to eliminate the threat by eliminating the need. And the only way they know to eliminate need is to eliminate the person creating it. The terror isn't rational. It's not based on anything you've done or any realistic assessment of danger. It's based on wounds from long ago that have never healed, on patterns learned when the avoidant was too young to distinguish between past and present. Their adult self might recognize that needing you is normal and healthy, but their wounded self experiences need as existential threat, as the same vulnerability that led to pain when they were small and powerless. And the wounded self is in control right now, flooding the avoidant with fear so intense that staying away from you feels like the only option for survival. The avoidant is also terrified of the dependence that need creates. If they need you, they're dependent on you showing up, being consistent, not abandoning them. And dependence means loss of control. The avoidant can't control whether you'll meet their needs. They can't guarantee you won't hurt them. They can't ensure you won't leave. This lack of control is unbearable because control is the avoidant's primary coping mechanism. They've maintained safety through controlling their own emotional state, which they accomplished by never needing anyone enough that the other person's behavior could affect them. But they need you, And that need means you have power over their emotional well-being, and that power terrifies them more than being alone ever could. The threat to their identity. The avoidant fell for you, and falling for you is destroying the identity they've spent their life constructing. The avoidant sees themselves as independent, self-sufficient, someone who doesn't need romantic partnership to be complete. This identity isn't just a preference, it's a carefully built psychological structure that protects them from vulnerability. They're the person who can be alone and be fine. They're the one who doesn't get attached easily. They're above the messy emotional entanglements that trap other people. This identity has been their safety, their pride, their way of maintaining superiority in a world where needing people felt like weakness. But they fell for you, and falling for you proves that identity was always fiction. They're not actually above attachment. They do need someone. They can't be fine alone when the alternative is being with you. They're experiencing exactly the messy emotional entanglement they've always looked down on. The gap between who they believe themselves to be and what they're actually experiencing is creating cognitive dissonance so severe it's threatening their entire sense of self. If they're not the independent one, who are they? If they do need partnership, what does that say about all the years they claimed they didn't? If they're capable of falling this hard, what does that reveal about all their previous relationships where they claimed emotional unavailability was just who they were? Staying away from you is an attempt to restore the threatened identity. The avoidant is thinking that if they can just create enough distance, if they can just prove they can walk away from you, they'll confirm they're still the person they thought they were. They'll demonstrate that they don't actually need you, that they were right about being independent, that the feelings they're experiencing can be controlled through withdrawal. It's an identity rescue mission disguised as relationship ending. But what they're discovering is that distance doesn't eliminate the feelings. It just forces them to experience those feelings without the comfort of your presence, which makes the feelings even more overwhelming. The threat to identity also includes the avoidance fear of becoming someone they've always judged. They've looked down on people who are needy in relationships, who get attached and hurt, who can't function when love ends. And now they're becoming exactly that person. They're needy for your attention. They're attached in ways that hurt. They can't function normally because thoughts of you consume them. The shame of becoming what they've always condemned is almost unbearable. Staying away from you is partially about avoiding the shame of admitting they've become the thing they've always seen as pathetic. The overwhelm of emotional intensity. The avoidant fell for you, and the emotional intensity is completely overwhelming their nervous system. Feelings that might be manageable for someone with secure attachment are experienced by the avoidant as tidal waves that threaten to drown them. Love feels like obsession. Care feels like dependency. Attachment feels like loss of self. Desire feels like desperation. Every emotion is amplified because the avoidant has been suppressing and avoiding these feelings for so long that when they finally surface, they surface with accumulated force. The avoidant is used to feeling relatively little. They've spent years developing the ability to dampen emotional experience, to intellectualize feelings, to stay in their head rather than their heart. But you've broken through that dampening entirely. They feel everything when it comes to you, and the everything is too much. When they think about you, they don't have a manageable warm feeling. They have consuming thoughts they can't control. When they imagine losing you, they don't have mild disappointment. They have panic that feels like they're dying. When they consider being vulnerable with you, they don't have normal nervousness. They have terror that paralyzes them completely. The emotional overwhelm is particularly acute because the avoidant has no skills for managing intense positive feelings about a real relationship. They might have experienced infatuation before, but infatuation is safe because it's based on fantasy rather than reality. With you, the feelings are about an actual person who sees them clearly and still chooses them. The feelings are based on real connection that's challenging them to be more vulnerable than they've ever been. The feelings are attached to a relationship that could actually become something meaningful if they were brave enough. And real feelings about real possibility are infinitely more overwhelming than fantasy feelings about imaginary scenarios. The avoidant is also experiencing emotional overwhelm because multiple feelings are happening simultaneously. They love you and they're terrified of you. They want to be close to you and they want to run from you. They're drawn to you and repelled by their own neediness. They feel hope about what you could build together and despair about their inability to show up. All of these contradictory feelings are coexisting, creating internal chaos the avoidant doesn't know how to navigate. Staying away simplifies things. It eliminates the confusion of contradictory feelings by choosing just one: distance. It's not actually simpler emotionally, but it feels more manageable than trying to hold all the contradictions at once, the fear of inevitable abandonment. The avoidant fell for you, and falling for you has activated their core wound, the certainty that anyone they love will eventually leave. This isn't a worry or a concern. For the avoidant, it's a fact. If they let you in completely, if they allow themselves to need you, if they build their life around you, you will leave. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually. And when you leave, it will destroy them in ways they're certain they can't survive. So staying away now is a preemptive strike against future abandonment. If they leave first, if they prevent the attachment from deepening further, they can control the pain. It will hurt now, but it won't annihilate them the way your eventual leaving would. This fear of inevitable abandonment is based on the avoidance history. They learned through experience that people leave, that love doesn't last, that getting close to someone just sets you up for devastating loss. Maybe their parents were inconsistent or emotionally unavailable. Maybe early caregivers abandoned them literally or emotionally. Maybe they experienced loss that taught them love ends in pain. Whatever the origin, the lesson was learned completely. Attachment leads to abandonment, and the more attached you are, the worse the abandonment will feel. The avoidant is operating from this childhood learning even though you've given them no reason to believe you'll abandon them. The fear isn't about you, it's about the past playing on repeat. The certainty of future abandonment is also a self-fulfilling prophecy the avoidant can't see. They're so certain you'll leave that they behave in ways that push you away. They create distance that makes you feel unloved. They're inconsistent in ways that damage your trust. They're unavailable in ways that leave you lonely. And eventually you do leave, not because you wanted to, but because staying was destroying you. Then the avoidant gets to say they were right, you did leave, people always leave. They use your leaving as confirmation of their worldview, without recognizing that their behavior based on that worldview is what created the leaving in the first place. Staying away from you is the avoidant's attempt to avoid the pain of abandonment by abandoning first. They're leaving before you can leave them. They're choosing the pain of walking away over the pain of being left. In their psychology, this feels like power and control. They're determining when and how the loss happens rather than being victimized by your eventual departure. But what they don't see is that leaving you to protect themselves from you leaving creates the exact pain they're trying to avoid. They're abandoning something precious to avoid being abandoned, and the loss is the same regardless of who initiated it. The inability to accept vulnerability. The avoidant fell for you, and falling for you requires vulnerability they cannot accept. Being in love means admitting someone matters enough to hurt you. It means acknowledging you have needs that only they can meet. It means showing parts of yourself that you usually hide. It means being seen fully and trusting you'll be accepted rather than rejected. The avoidant's entire psychology is organized around avoiding exactly this kind of exposure. They've spent their life building walls specifically to prevent anyone from having this kind of access, but you have access anyway, and the vulnerability that creates is unbearable. The avoidant is terrified that if they're fully vulnerable with you, you'll see how damaged they are and leave. They're afraid that the real them, the wounded, scared, needy person beneath the defended exterior, is fundamentally unlovable. So they show you the defended version, the independent, self-sufficient, emotionally controlled version. But you fell for the real them, the one that occasionally breaks through the defenses. And now the avoidant is terrified that if they lower the defenses completely, if they let you see them as they actually are all the time, you'll be disappointed. You'll realize they're not who you thought they were. You'll understand they're too broken for the relationship to work. This inability to accept vulnerability is also about the avoidant's fear of being known. Being truly known by another person means you can't hide, can't pretend, can't maintain the performance that protects you from judgment. The avoidant is afraid that if you truly know them, you'll see all their flaws and limitations and fears. You'll recognize how scared they are, how wounded, how much less put together than they appear. And this knowledge will give you power over them. power to hurt them or reject them or use their vulnerabilities against them. The fear of being known completely is strong enough that staying away and never letting you truly in feels safer than the alternative. The vulnerability falling for you requires also means the avoidant would have to admit they were wrong about not needing anyone. They'd have to acknowledge that their independence was defensive rather than authentic. They'd have to confess that the walls they built weren't healthy boundaries but fear-based barriers. They'd have to own that their emotional unavailability wasn't a preference but a wound. And these admissions feel like psychological death. The avoidant has built their entire self-concept on these defensive positions. To admit they were wrong means destroying the foundation they've built their identity on. Staying away lets them maintain their illusions about themselves, even if maintaining those illusions means losing you. The conflict between desire and defense. The avoidant fell for you, and now they're trapped in an excruciating internal conflict. Every part of them that's capable of connection wants to move toward you. But every part of them that's organized around self-protection is screaming to move away. Desire and defense are at war inside them, and the war is tearing them apart. They want to call you, and they can't let themselves. They want to see you, and they force themselves to stay away. They want to be vulnerable, and they shut down every impulse toward openness. They're fighting themselves constantly, and the fight is exhausting and agonizing. This internal conflict manifests as paralysis. The avoidant can't move toward you because defense won't allow it, but they can't move on from you because desire won't release you. So they're frozen, stuck in a psychological purgatory where they're connected to you through their feelings but disconnected from you through their behavior. They're suffering from wanting you while simultaneously denying themselves access to you. They're creating their own torture by refusing to choose, by trying to somehow have you without the risk of having you, by wanting the relationship without accepting the vulnerability relationship requires. The conflict is particularly brutal because moments of each side winning alternate unpredictably. Sometimes desire wins and the avoidant reaches out, is warm, shows glimpses of their real feelings. These moments give you hope and give them temporary relief from the tension. But then defense reasserts control and they pull back, become cold, create distance again. The push-pull isn't strategy or manipulation. It's the visible manifestation of internal war. You're experiencing the casualties of a battle happening entirely within the avoidance psychology, a battle between the part that fell for you and the part that can't accept falling for anyone. The conflict also prevents the avoidant from being present even when they're with you. Part of them is there, enjoying you, feeling connected. But another part is already planning the next withdrawal, already protecting against getting too close, already ensuring they don't become too vulnerable. They can't fully relax into connection because defense is always activated, always monitoring for threat, always ready to pull them back from the edge of true intimacy. You're never getting their full presence because the part that's present is constantly being undermined by the part that's defending. The misguided belief that distance will eliminate feelings. The avoidant fell for you and they're staying away because they believe distance will eliminate the feelings. They think if they just avoid you long enough, if they just don't see you or talk to you, the feelings will fade. They'll return to their defended baseline where they don't need anyone and everything is under control. They're treating their feelings for you like a temporary condition that will resolve with time and space, like an illness you can wait out. But feelings don't work that way, especially not feelings as deep as what they feel for you. What the avoidant is discovering, though they may not admit it, is that distance intensifies rather than eliminates the feelings. Not being able to see you or talk to you makes them think about you more, not less. Your absence creates longing that presence never did because presence meant managing fear, while absence means just feeling how much they miss you. They thought staying away would create relief, but it's creating suffering. They're alone with their feelings now, without even the comfort of your actual presence, and the feelings are consuming them more completely than they ever did when you were accessible. The belief that distance eliminates feelings also reveals the avoidant's fundamental misunderstanding of love. They think love is a response to presence, something that grows when you're together and fades when you're apart. But real love, the kind they've stumbled into with you, doesn't fade with distance. It endures. It persists. It might even deepen in absence as they realize what they've lost. The avoidant is learning too late that the depth of connection they formed with you isn't something they can simply walk away from. They're carrying you with them in the distance, suffering from your absence in ways that prove their strategy of staying away is failing completely. The avoidant is also discovering that even if the feelings did fade with enough time and distance, they don't want them to fade. There's a part of them that treasures what they feel for you even as it terrifies them. They know what they have with you is rare. They recognize that most people never experience connection this deep. They understand that if they let these feelings disappear, they'll be losing something they're unlikely to find again. So they're caught between wanting the feelings to fade so they can return to comfortable defended numbness, and wanting the feelings to stay because they represent something precious they've never had before. The hope that you'll wait indefinitely. The avoidant fell for you and they're staying away, but they're also hoping desperately that you'll wait. They want time to work through their fear at their own pace without pressure. They want space to figure out if they can overcome their avoidance enough to show up for you properly. They want the option to come back when they're ready without you having moved on. They're asking you to hold space for them indefinitely while they work through internal conflicts they may never resolve. And they're doing this without communicating any of it, expecting you to understand and wait, based on nothing but faith that they're worth waiting for. This hope that you'll wait reveals the avoidant's profound entitlement. They want you to be available on their timeline while they remain completely unavailable on yours. They want you to tolerate their absence and their inconsistency while they decide whether they can handle a real relationship. They want you to sacrifice your needs for certainty and consistency while they prioritize their need for space and control. They expect you to do all the emotional labor of maintaining hope in a connection they're actively abandoning, and they expect you to do it without complaint or expectation of reciprocity. The hope that you'll wait is also the avoidance fantasy of having it both ways. They want to stay away to protect themselves from vulnerability while keeping you as an option for if they ever feel brave enough to try. They want to avoid the relationship's demands while keeping the relationship as a possibility. They want to not choose you while preventing you from being chosen by anyone else. It's a completely unfair expectation that demonstrates how much the avoidant is operating from their own fear and need without any consideration of yours. But underneath the entitlement is genuine hope, born from genuine feeling. The avoidant hopes you'll wait because they actually want to come back. They're staying away, not because they don't want you, but because they're trying to work up the courage to want you in ways that would require them to show up. They hope you'll wait because they hope that given enough time, they can overcome the fear that's driving them away. They hope you'll be patient because they know they need patience to have any chance of becoming someone capable of the relationship you deserve. The hope is real, even though the expectation is unreasonable. The inevitable regret. The avoidant fell for you and they're staying away. And the staying away is creating regret that's destroying them. They're watching themselves waste the best thing that's ever happened to them. They're observing themselves sabotage a connection they know is rare and precious. They're conscious that their fear is driving them to make choices they'll regret for the rest of their lives. But consciousness doesn't translate into different behavior because the fear is stronger than the awareness. They know they're making a mistake. They know they're losing you. They know they'll regret this. And they're doing it anyway because they're psychological prisoners of wounds they can't escape. The regret is already present even as they continue staying away. Every day without you is teaching them what you meant to them. Every moment of your absence is revealing what your presence provided. Every experience they have that they wish they could share with you is showing them the cost of their distance. The regret isn't waiting until you're completely gone. It's accumulating in real time as they experience the consequences of their choice to stay away while they're still making that choice. The avoidant is also aware that this regret is entirely self-created. You didn't reject them or hurt them or give them reason to leave. They left themselves. They're creating their own suffering through their inability to overcome fear. And the awareness that they're the author of their own tragedy makes the regret even more painful. They can't blame you or circumstances or bad timing. They can only blame themselves and their psychological limitations. And that blame is crushing them even as they continue the behavior creating it. The avoidant fell for you, and falling for you was the best and worst thing that's happened to them. Best because it gave them a glimpse of what real connection feels like, what genuine intimacy could be. what they've been missing by keeping everyone at distance. Worst because it activated every fear they've spent their life avoiding, overwhelmed defenses they've relied on for safety, threatened an identity they've built their entire sense of self around. They're staying away not because they don't care, but because they care too much. Not because you don't matter, but because you matter more than they can handle. Not because the relationship isn't worth fighting for, but because fighting for it would require facing themselves in ways they're not ready for. And so they stay away, suffering in distance, hoping you'll understand what they can't explain, waiting for courage that may never come, losing you slowly while loving you completely, unable to accept the very thing they want most, because accepting it would mean accepting themselves as someone vulnerable enough to need it.